Hello and welcome to the Six Cells podcast. My name is Mike Nicholson from Six Cells. I'm your host today. I have some exciting news before we start. This podcast started in the year 2020 during a lockdown and was basic, shall we say, to say the least. It was recorded over Zoom meetings because we were all locked away at home. It's come on a little bit now. We have a fabulous studio and we have a sponsor, and it's the first time I've ever entertained the idea of having a sponsor, but it's a company that I'm a massive fan of. So I am pleased to say from today onwards, the Six Cells podcast will be sponsored by Lumen Research. And for those of you that don't know who Lumen Research are, they're an eye tracking technology company that are helping to expand our understanding of human attention and helping brands to turn attention into action. So as you would expect, on the first episode sponsored by Lumen Research, we have Mike Follett with us today, the CEO of Lumen. Welcome. You are the long-standing guest, I think. I think it's maybe your fourth appearance in those 4 years.
It's about time I started paying you to appear.
Sounds good. If we can get an IO over to Mike, somebody please, that'd be amazing. And Anders Lithner, the CEO of Brand Metrics. How are you, Anders? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm good.
Welcome to London. London not raining, which is always excellent, especially when you left the rain.
I did this morning, so it feels like being on a summer holiday.
Absolutely amazing. People don't say that often when they come to London. So, very special episode, Mike. Thank you very much for the sponsorship. As I say, you've been the guest that's been on the most, so I think it's only right that probably you just take over and start to own it slowly but surely. I understand you guys were, for those listening in the future, which is, let's be honest, pretty much everyone, we are in ATS 2024 week, and tomorrow you are going to be on stage with Havas talking about some quite exciting research that your companies have collaborated on, easy for me to say, alongside Havas. So wanted to talk about that today. Who wants to kick us off? So where did this research come from? How did the collaboration come to be?
Well, we've been working with and for Havas for a number of years now, and we've been using our attention data to help sort of Havas plan on the basis of attention, but also measure what they're doing, but then also link to outcomes so that they can do even better next time when it comes to all forms of digital media. So as one of our longest standing clients, you always try and bring those guys interesting ideas. We've had this idea about how we can link attention not just to clicks and conversions, but how we can link it to brand outcomes, memory and consideration and preference and intent to purchase and things like that. And really, the idea came out of combining Lumen's predictions about attention to Anders's data about intention through a conversation with John Waite over at Havas.
Former guest as well, yeah.
Former guest as well. And John really is a leader in the field of applied attention economics. And it was really just a chat like that, which is what happens when you have deep relationships with these sorts of companies. You can just spitball ideas, and it really sort of ran from there. So a conversation that John and I had about going beyond clicks to thinking about memories. And then that inspired a conversation between me and Anders.
Excellent. And Anders, for those that don't know, could you give us a bit of an introduction to Brand Metrics and what you do? I was going to ask you that before, but I got so excited, I just went straight.
Yeah, but I think we're all equally excited in this room, so that's all good. No, that's just like Mike said. We're providing outcomes data on the brand outcomes of campaigns. So we set out some 6-7 years ago to provide brand lift on campaigns in a way that scales, and we've been doing it since. So we've been running some 35,000 plus campaigns. I think we've been measuring for brand lift with publishers from all around the world. So mainly publishers are using this to come up with some feedback around the effectiveness of the campaigns they're selling to advertisers. Awesome. And also we've been talking for years about
absolutely.
That there's a point where attention and brand lift should meet.
Yeah.
But the publishers, I think what's interesting about the conversation I had with John was try to understand that how could we provide the relationship between attention and memory. That was the question that he has. Havas is all about the meaningful media network. Right. That's what they really want to talk about. And one of the meanings of media, that makes it meaningful, is its impact on memory. But this is actually quite a difficult thing to do. You think you can do it through normal brand lift measures, but there are so many restrictions on the data you get back. It's so ungranular, and it can be really difficult to actually extrapolate what you're really learning there. And I think Anders, you always do this when we're talking about you don't tell people quite how weirdly unique and unusual your way of collecting data is.
I don't have to, because you do it for me all the time. So.
because it's really important that we couldn't do what we'll talk about it in a second, but we couldn't do what we've done with any other company in the world. It's only in the way in which you collect data and the way in which you and who you collect data from that allows us to do the sort of analysis that we've done by merging these two data sets. I mean, you should tell. How does it work?
This is very true, because brand lift is a kind of metrics that tends to come from the research community, and the research community is so accustomed to go outside of whatever it is they're studying and do it in their own laboratories or panels or surveys, but we stay inside of the ecosystem where the advertisement is happening. And that's the whole thing, right? Because we're integrated on the sell side, which means we have the granularity, we know the viewability and the view time, not just an ad request, and it's not a panel member especially recruited to answer surveys, it's the actual audience. So I think we have the data to which we can ascribe your attention data, and then we have the brand lift data in a way that isn't. I mean, some customers are asking, can we do this question instead, or could we have a bespoke question? We try to say no, because the idea of doing it at the same time is what creates this massive benchmarks of consistent data that you can then use for modeling the super interesting stuff.
What really excited us about it is that usually with brand lift studies, so we're an attention technology company. So if you can, which means that we've done loads of research in the past, and then that builds a predictive model. If you can tell me the viewability characteristics, the fact that it was a big ad and it was on screen for a long time and it was on this website, I can then use everything I know in the past from the past data to say, well, I can't promise, but I reckon that ad got 3 seconds of attention, another one got 2, another one got 1, and another one, even if it was on screen, everything we know probably means that we think it gets ignored, because lots of ads get ignored. Okay. So we do lots of ground truth data, collect lots of eye tracking data from our various panels, and then apply that to viewability data to give our customers an estimate of what happened in the past, but also to give them an insight about what could happen in the future. If you go and stop spending money over here and start spending money over there, we think you're going to get more attention and better results. So that's what we do as a company. And then we often link that to brand lift data to say, hey, look, the ads that we think people looked at, they're the ones that also people clicked on or say that they remembered in a survey. But we're slightly hampered by the way in which most brand lift companies work. Most lift companies work by having a big panel of people, and then advertisers buy a campaign, millions of ads, and hopefully some of those ads will reach the computers or the screens of people on the panel, and then they'll serve them a questionnaire afterwards. And that's great. It's a really good system, love it, but it does depend on having quite big campaigns. You need to have tens of millions of ads going out to have any hope that at least some of them reach the people on the brand lift company's panel, and that within that someone will remember, be prepared to answer a questionnaire and then perhaps even remember it. Have the big panels, and often secondly, those to make things as simple as possible, the brand lift companies. Those other brand lift companies, brilliant though they are, will use just what's called an event pixel to measure if the ad was served to people or not, and they won't know if the ad was served in a viewable position or not.
Right.
Yeah, and they won't be able to say how long the ad was viewable for.
So the surveys don't use viewability data in their.
They just use whether or not the machine received and that's a bit of a problem for us, because we have to have the viewability data to be able to work out, well, given it's a big ad on this location, therefore we think it's got 1 or 2 or 3 seconds of attention. So it's a problem. And that's what John and I were talking about back in the pub, going, how the hell can we do this? What's really amazing about brand metrics is they work in a totally different way. Instead of having a panel, what you guys do is have an integration with the publisher, with the Guardian or the New York Times or the
a lot of them,
whoever it might, the Times or the Telegraph or whoever it is. And my understanding is that instead of having a panel and waiting for them to see the ads, what happens is that you for audiences that are logged into their accounts, so subscribers to these.
They don't have to be logged in. We can do this with logged in audiences, but we can do it with any audience. But we have access to first party data, which is the whole thing, right?
So someone will be served one ad for Ford, another ad for Ford, perhaps a third ad for Ford, and then the fourth ad won't be an ad. It'll be a questionnaire.
That's a very typical scenario, exactly. So we operate in the wild, and if you want to know whether people have a brand perception, and that is heightened by the fact that they've been exposed to a campaign, you need some data about the degree of their brand awareness, brand preference, etc., and some data about the degree to which they've been exposed. And it's the degree. It's not just a have been or haven't been. So we utilize the frequency to which people have been exposed and the time to which they've been exposed, and that creates.
Is this what we talk about as aggregate attention?
No, for us it's still aggregate exposure at this level. So we know that some people have a very small exposure, maybe only once for 1 second. Some people have 14 exposures for a gross time of 41 seconds, and then we know what's the relationship between this degree of exposure and the brand perception. And that's how we calculate brand lift. But having this underlying data of exposure means you can predict the attention.
Exactly. And this is what's really, really exciting. When we were talking with John about how we do a meta-analysis of all of these brand lift studies, we realized that all the other providers couldn't give us the viewability data. But secondly, they couldn't also give us the frequency data. And then finally, we found that when we were even looking at this data, all the questionnaire data was different. Mm-hmm. Because every time you do a brand lift study, Ford want to ask the questions in one way, and Audi want to ask it another way. And the beauty about the brand metrics thing is that, you've got, because it's a launch from the publisher, you've got all the viewability data in all the detail that we needed. Secondly, you've got all the frequency data, whether or not people were served 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 ads, and then finally, and this is a sort of bug that has become a feature, to keep things simple, all of the questionnaires that brand metrics do are exactly the same. You can have any colour you like as long as it's black.
Yeah.
And other people go, oh my God, what a problem. But this is brilliant for us. Because this means that we can look at all of the studies that you've done over the last 5 or 6 years and aggregate them all up. And that's exactly what we've done. So brand metrics have this enormous data set for them. 5,000 publishers, 35,000 campaigns. I think about 8 million people who have done. It's one of the largest data sets I have ever seen in my life.
In terms of response data, I think it might be one of the biggest. It's just one question, so it's not the big team.
But the great thing is, but it was too much data for us. I mean, what we did is to keep things simple. We just took a mere 9,000 campaigns and a mere 1.8 million people.
Yeah, and also for comparability, we wanted to stay insanely comparable between all the things. So we just keep everything.
So we limited it to a smaller study, but even then, probably the largest study of its kind ever in the world.
The numbers that you're talking about.
Oh, holy man!
It must be right.
Easily the largest attention and outcome study undertaken in human history. And the analysis and the combination of the data has been really revelatory.
Excellent. So there's a lot of moving parts there. There's how often somebody saw an ad, how many times they saw an ad, how long they were exposed to that ad, how long they probably paid attention to that ad. How do you then get to even make sense of that on the back end and say, this is how we can teach brands what they need to know, like in terms of frequency, duration of exposure. How do you put all of that together with your data and come up with something that people can understand? Because that sounds like quite a
well, perhaps we'll do it the other way round to say, what have we learned then?
Yeah.
Because I think that there are 4 or 5 really, really important learnings here, and then a couple of really massive implications from the data. So the first thing that we have found, which is tremendously reassuring, I think, for both of us, is that there is an astonishingly strong correlation between attention time and all of the outcomes measured by brand metrics.
Which were?
So brand metrics measures this single question that they ask, the same again and again, measures whether or not people are aware of a brand, whether it's in their consideration set, if it's one of their preferred brands, or if they're intending to buy it or to act on it right now. So awareness, consideration, preference, and intent. And
you're getting really good at this.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, exactly.
So these are the 4 things that has happened for all of these different categories, and each of those 4 metrics goes up as attention goes up.
They're going nowhere with no attention. That's another reassurance.
They do not exist, so that ads can't work without attention, and more attention means better results.
Exactly.
And can you kind of plot it on a graph, and you can just see with each second that passes the awareness?
Absolutely. So what we find time and again is that awareness goes up an awful lot. Whereas purchase intent, as you might imagine, goes up, but perhaps not as quickly. But then again, awareness starts from a higher position as well. The second big learning is that not only do all of these metrics increase because of attention time, but the rate of increase differs by different metrics. So you can see quite big changes in awareness as you get from 1 second to 2 seconds to 3 seconds. That's true. But in terms of sheer percentage increase, in actual fact, it's the lower funnel metrics that grow fastest. More attention leads to greater increases for intention to purchase, and which I think is really fascinating as well. You can do a lot with a little when it comes to attention. You can do a lot with a little attention when it comes to awareness. But you see the biggest increases when you get the large chunks of attention when it comes to preference and intention, which stands to reason to me.
It does. I mean, it takes repetition to get into the mindset of people, but it takes time to get into the hearts of people. So you need more duration to really influence somebody for preference and being the favorite brand. To create awareness, you need repetition, but you might not necessarily need really long attention in time.
You see, I think this is the third big learning. So we've had attention drives outcomes. Attention drives lots of attention drives lower funnel outcomes a bit more, which I think is interesting there. The third thing is it's about aggregate attention. What we've found time and again for almost all the categories that were looked at and the objectives we've seen is that you don't necessarily need a block of 5 or 10 seconds of attention that matters. You do need 5 or 10 seconds of attention, but it can be split over lots and lots of ads.
If the ads are the same.
So yeah.
It's sufficient attention. So if there's too short, you get the adding them up gets you nowhere. No,
so you have to have a minimum amount of attention, half a second, 1 second to do it. But you can add it up over time. And it's the aggregate attention which is super, super important. Now, this is really, I'd say really fascinating, but it's really commercially important because often people have come to us at Lumen and say, well, your data suggests that TV gets 11 seconds or 12 seconds of attention. Why on earth would you ever advertise with digital display ads if they're only getting 1 or 2 seconds of attention? And you go, well, whoever would buy one digital ad? Buy 10 of them. But they add up.
Yeah.
It's the aggregate stuff and this I think helps you understand why newspaper advertising works or why digital advertising works. It doesn't work necessarily on a unit of one ad. It works on a unit of a pack of 10.
Yeah.
And that's the really important thing for us to realize, that we've perhaps been analyzing things as an industry with using the wrong unit of analysis. We shouldn't be, when it comes to digital advertising, we shouldn't be thinking of things on a per ad basis, but on a pack of ads basis. And that's really, really fascinating.
But if we go back to our school days, and perhaps we were naughty. I mean, I wasn't, but I heard that other people were.
Other children, yeah, no, exactly.
And then you were made to do lines, right? Like just write the same thing out time and time and time again, because we learn through repetition, like humans learn through repetition. I was speaking to a lady called Claire Parrish just yesterday, who has started a charity for defibrillators and life-saving training. And she said the big problem is, like someone like myself, after this, I'm rushing off to coach under 7 children. You do your FA first aid, and then you don't have to do it again for 2 years. But there's 0 repetition between doing it then and then. And so if something happens, you've forgotten it because you haven't repeated it, right? So it makes total sense that a pack of 10 ads with maybe just 1 second each are slowly building up those neural pathways until it becomes a big...
Exactly.
Like, so I think Shazia Ganai called it like the brand room in your brain, you know, like so the Cadbury's room slowly gets a bit more purple and a bit more drumming gorilla
exactly.
Until eventually you're...
And I think this is really, really important. We live in a world where we're perhaps seduced by this idea of 1+ coverage. And our data here that we've shown is that perhaps you need 3 ads anyway, even to get 1+ coverage, because people are very good at ignoring stuff. You know, but even so that's one insight that we've got there. But secondly, to get the dendrites in the brain and working together and to create those neural pathways that you're talking about requires repetition. It absolutely, the science is really, really clear about it. So yes, it is possible to communicate in a single ad once, but it is a much better idea to follow the British Army maxim of tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them.
Yeah.
You need to do it 3 times to get the message in, even the first time. Yeah. And to create a habit or to create you definitely need repeated exposure and so. So I think this idea of frequency and of lots of little sort of slivers of attention that are repeated rather than one big chunk of attention as the optimal way of creating memories. It fits with our data, but
and
it
it's
also
just like you said,
fits with decades of educational science and neuroscience.
And this is as long as we're talking about creating memories, which sits closely with awareness as a concept, like being aware of something. That's when you go for the kind of high frequency, short attention time strategy. You pass the same people in the reception in your building every day, and you say hi in the streets, but because there's a high repetition, short interaction, it's not getting you further than saying hi in the streets. But if you really want purchase intent or something deeper, then you need instances of longer attention. So that's equally
yes, I think
there in the data.
This is, I think, the fourth big insight, that while there is a general connection between attention outcomes, while there is a general thing about repetition and aggregate attention time, and time is the thing that really matters. It isn't just about, it's about a minimum amount of time and an aggregate amount of time. The fourth big learning that we've got is that different objectives require different levels of attention and even different chunks of attention. Like Anders was saying, we found that things like awareness are easier to move if you have lots and lots of little bursts of attention. However, when you really want to change someone's mind and really establish a new memory rather than reinforce one that's already existing, or to give people something, perhaps a piece of information that they haven't ever heard before or something, 10 drips of information or 10 drips of attention doesn't equate to one big chunk of attention there. Right. And so different objectives require not just different levels of attention, but different bursts of attention.
Different campaign strategies.
So which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So is it that somebody's now interested and therefore they spend longer looking at it, which means that it has more attention at the lower end of the funnel? Or is it that the creative just happened to make them pay more attention, and that then led to the consideration?
I think this is a great thing. And I must say, like all good research projects, it has answered some questions and then it suddenly asks a whole load more like that. You go, well, so we've just realised that this is just the start of endless questions. I mean, sure, we'll come on to that more. I mean, before we get, so we've talked about how attention leads to improvements in all of these metrics. The metrics themselves change different rates with different levels of attention. Attention time is the real thing. It's not just whether or not people saw it at all. It's how long they saw it for and how in aggregate over there. We've talked about that, about how different objectives need different levels of attention. The final thing, though, that we've found isn't just about the effectiveness of attention, but we've also been able to put the element of cost in there as well, to have a look at not just the effectiveness, but the efficiency. Because all very well us going, well, you need to buy 10 ads that each get 1 second of attention, but you don't have to buy 10 ads. That's 10 times more expensive. So the final thing, and this is what I'm really excited about, is that we've been able to add in the cost of the ads that these different advertisers bought. And that has revealed 2 quite different strategies here. One is to go and buy 4 or 5 ads. The optimal number is 4 or 5 ads that deliver 1 or 2 seconds of attention each. And that is more efficient in most cases as a means of not just getting attention, but also driving memories or awareness than buying one big ad. Except in one instance, which is when you want to communicate an entirely new message or to drive a particular purchase intent. If what you want is more than just memory, you want actual money, then it is worthwhile buying a big chunk of attention. You have 2 quite different strategies based on the attentional requirements to get the job done. And I think that this is what's and this again comes back down to the Havas thing, to be honest. I can remember when we presented the stuff to John initially, you go, this is wonderful, this is amazing as a sort of research project, that you can link attention to outcomes like that. But how much does it cost? Because ultimately, media agencies and the advertisers that they serve, they can't just do things in a science experiment. They have to spend the money.
Yeah.
And so adding in the dimension of money, I think, has been really, really important.
But I know from previous research that Lumen have done across all of the 11 years that you've been doing eye tracking studies, that around 70% of viewable ads are not actually viewed. So surely the first thing, in order to make it so you can afford it, is to stop spending money on the 70% of ads that won't get viewed, and then maybe buy some of the ads that will get viewed, and then that doesn't necessarily have to cost you any more money, does it?
But that's certainly right. Yeah, absolutely. People are very good at ignoring ads, and you can save a lot of money by stopping investing in crap ads. Good idea. Yeah, very keen on that.
We see that in our data too. What's the best hint here? It's stop spending what isn't going to work anyway, and it's you don't even need attention. All you need is viewability and view time. Like if it has no viewability or view time, it won't get attention. So stop spending on the. If you just go for the cheapest inventory, that's what you get, right?
There is savings to be made there, what's interesting about this research is that that's something that I think Havas and to an extent. But definitely Havas, definitely Dentsu, to an extent Interpublic, because they use an awful lot of our data, Publicis increasingly as well. I think they're doing that sort of basic savings already.
Right.
What we've done here is to go to the next stage, to not just remove the crap, but optimize the remaining good stuff. And I think that's what's really, really exciting about it.
So you mentioned there that if you want cash rather than awareness, then you need to get somebody to maybe spend a little bit longer with the ad. So in my mind, and I simplify everything, so I may have oversimplified this, I'm thinking, well, in certain instances, video gets longer chunks of attention and display gets less. But I've always thought of video as more of a brand building format, with display being a little bit more direct response. But is it potentially the case that it might be the wrong way round? And might be thinking about that the wrong way round?
Well, so having established the main learnings of this research, like I said, it just begs a whole load of other questions on top of that. this research we've deliberately just kept to display advertising, sort of the MPUs and the billboards and things like that. There's video content sometimes within those things, but mainly, it's what you might call display format.
Yeah.
And we did that just to try and keep things simple. In the next few months, we'll be releasing the video data. So we'll be able to do the analysis there. So we will have some stories and some news about that there already coming soon. Perhaps we'll be back on the pod with a
sponsor. You come when you want, I guess.
So there'll be some really, really interesting additional learnings to come there. But I think you're probably going to be right. I think that while we've proven the impact of repeated attention and its impact on all of these different brand measures for display ads, the next iteration of the data about video will just deepen our understanding more about that. But that's just one of the questions that arises from this. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things we haven't
we're
done.
already slicing this data by industry category and formats and all. So we already know a little bit more than we're going to tell tomorrow at the ATS, and we're excited about the kind of next stage of these analysis too. Also, I think this, because we keep coming back to the different metrics and the objectives. Do you want to build awareness, or do you want people to cash for something? It also comes down to who you are as a brand, because we've always known from our data that it's, unless people already know you, you're going to struggle to get people to love you, and unless they already like you, they're not going to buy you. So if you're a challenger brand, you'd be wise to first build awareness. Maybe don't spend it on super expensive, high impact formats, because you can do that in a cheaper way by repeating smaller attention units. If you're a household brand with everybody knows and loves, it might make sense to get in front of people with some longer attention time, because you can harvest what you've been building for years. So it comes down to who you are a lot,
and what you're exactly who you are, who you're talking to,
and who you're talking to,
and who they're. But and I think future bits of research that we're already starting is again about different categories. Is it true that car advertising works in a different way to insurance, to FMCG or whatever? That'll be an interesting thing. The context, because of the richness of the brand metrics data, we don't just know which publishers the ads appeared on, but the content around it. Is it better to have ads on the football pages or the recipe pages or the news pages? And even within news, there's an awful lot of concerns about whether or not you should appear next to what you might call hard news versus soft news. I think already we know that there doesn't seem to be any danger at all to advertisers appearing next to hard news. And this is conciliant with a whole lot of work that we've been doing, that Lumen's been doing with Teeds and with Ozone and with Imperial College London. And so
I find this really interesting, right? Because I started my career in press. And we used to sell news, and every advertiser would want the earliest possible page, which is where all the hard news was.
Yeah, of course.
And as long as it wasn't an airline on an air crash story, they were okay with it.
Yeah.
But since we've moved into the digital realm now, hypersensitive to where they want to be and how they want to be. And the second part to that, I think, is the context piece that you mentioned. So you've got, if we're saying that there's no negative shade, should we say, thrown on the brand by being next to news, then can we then also claim that there's therefore positive shade if you're next to something sexy like a big Champions League match or something?
Well, this is the thing. As speaking as a scientist here, we'll have to wait to see what the data tells us, because that we haven't done that. But that's a load of analysis that we've set in train already. So we'll have some stuff about categories. We'll have stuff about context. Creative is really, really important. And one of the things that Orlando Wood and I have been talking about is merging our data sets, the brand metrics and Lumen data set, with the System 1 data set. To understand it, are there higher or lower factors if you link to the System 1 data? Because that will, we don't know if there is the connection, but if there is, that might also help us isolate the impact of creative. There's going to be
if you put those three data sets together, my goodness.
You should. There is a major agency that we're working with right now to do exactly that.
Right.
So the Havas stuff is is really exciting. But we work with lots of different people, and so there's going to be some exciting stories there. There's targeting. And I think what's going to be really important is to understand campaigns that are directed to a broad audience, or campaigns that have been made use of targeting data, especially retargeting data, because as Anders was saying, for people who have perhaps visited a website, been cookied, and then now being retargeted with things, how does their attention pattern work, and how does their intention patterns work versus the pure prospecting campaigns? There's an endless, fascinating stream of data that can come off this. And I just feel like we are right at the start of a sort of new revolution in our understanding. Lumen has been, for the last 10 years or so, obsessed about attention. But what we're seeing now is a move from attention to intention, or certainly understanding the combination of attention data and intention data. And this is why I'm so excited that we've managed to do this research, because I know that the intention data that Brand Metrics have is unique in the world. And I think the combination of these two data sets is just, I genuinely feel excited about what we're learning every day.
We all are, I think, around this.
Yeah. Anders, so with your data set, and maybe it happened collectively, or maybe it didn't, I'm not sure, but Mike mentioned there about creative being important to learn more about as we move forward, and context. Are you able to tell with logged in audiences how different age groups or genders or areas of the world act differently, or is it pretty uniform, more or less? On the meta level, we can do a lot of comparisons between geographies and different targeting, different kinds of channels and stuff like that. But we are not a company that collects PII or that kind of personal identifiable information. So I guess the answer is no, but on the meta level, it's yes.
But it's a good idea, though. I mean, could you not go to The Guardian or
and
they
say, give me the age,
or no,
the data,
or the other way around? You give them the data so that they can tell. This is a bloody good idea, Mike. But we could do that, couldn't we?
Yeah, but in theory, I mean, the selection of data that we've just created is also kept enormously anonymous and protecting the publishers behind it and stuff like that. So it's the whole industry needs to come together to understand these things. But I think this is the right place for the industry to come together.
But thinking about it, though, I mean, the targeting data is obviously that's owned by the publishers.
Well, of course, they're doing the targeting.
It's wholly owned by them. It's their data behind a wall, because that's how they want to have and rightly so, in this post-GDPR world, you want to trust that the proper publisher has the data and the advertiser isn't targeting you. But that does mean they do have it amongst these trusted audiences. You could combine our data and your data and give it to The Guardian or the Telegraph or whoever it might be, and they could do that analysis.
Yeah,
and that could be this could be our data. I think what's exciting about our data is it's mainly from the buy side. The initial implications are for the buy side, but that's only because we're so myopically obsessed with advertisers. It could be just as interesting. It could be even more interesting for the sell side.
Oh, indeed. And I mean, one of the most interesting things, if you think about targeting, is where is this consumer in this trajectory from not being aware to being aware, but only aware, considering, preferring, intending. You'd execute campaigns differently on these 4 different or 5 different segments. So that could also be incorporated in the way we think about targeting.
Yeah. Do you see any trends between the first exposure to the ad, if we take your pack of 10 adverts in order to build those, to build that awareness, between the first exposure and the last exposure, does it get higher or lower? As people become more familiar with the message, are they able to take it in quicker, or is it fairly...
Yes, indeed. So I guess there was one question is which impression is the most important? Is the first. So go from 0 to 1 has a bigger impact than going from 1,000 to 1,001. Right. There's saturation, of course, but I think the big question you just asked is Do the big brands have an advantage? And yes, a lot. I mean, if how long does it take to identify the McDonald's arch? It takes like a split second. So yes, if our data scientist, when I say what would be your best advice to any brand wanting to do advertising, he's always saying, be a big brand already. But it actually is the best recommendation to any brand. But if you're not already a big brand, there are ways to get there, and that's what we're.
I think it fits exactly with Ehrenberg's sort of double jeopardy idea that big brands are better known already, and it seems that from our data they get noticed more, and from your data, not only do they get more attention, but they are better at converting that attention into intention. They are more efficient. They are more attentionally efficient in doing that. So I think that it's very exciting that our data, in some way, that our combined data, in some ways, challenges the sort of received wisdom about 1+ coverage, but on the other hand, sort of reinforces what we know about the double jeopardy rule.
I think this might be quite helpful for the industry. Obviously, on the face of it, of everything you've told me, that's it's clearly going to be of use to the industry. But I think it might help those publishers that maybe don't factor really high on the attention score. So they might only get a second of attention for each ad, but they've got billions of them. I'm thinking of social media news feeds. You might scroll past, you might see it quickly, you might go. They still work, right? So to your point of 10 ads. This is Mike. I'm getting to my question. How much attention does each of those one ads need to add up to proper attention? So if it's 0.0001, I'm assuming forget it. Does it need to be 1 second, 2 seconds? What do you need per unit in order to build that attention over 10 ads?
That's a pretty detailed question there. I think what we've found is that, and as you mentioned it at the start, there is a sort of a minimum level beneath which it's not worth a thing at all. About half a second we found is an absolute minimum for each exposure, but probably about a second is a good rule of thumb, and you really need 5 or 8 of those second exposures to see quite a lot. The curves that we see really start to go up after about 2.5 seconds, and
which is in line with amplified intelligence.
But I think this is the really interesting thing that much of the data that we're seeing is consistent or consilient with previous studies. So, we back in the 60s, people started doing just what they call mere exposure effect research. Robert Kojonc and people like that putting that out there. But it was really later in the 80s and 90s that this got going again. The real leader here is someone like Eric Duplessis over in South Africa, doing his massive great studies of repetition as the key driver of memory formation. And then I think our data really does fit with Karen's data. I mean, Karen Nelson-Field is the doyenne of attention researchers, and we're really pleased to find that our research matches it. I mean, there is a difference here. Karen's data tends to say that none of it's worth it unless you get 2.5 seconds in a chunk of attention, and I think that might be because much of her research is about video advertising, on TV and on cinema and stuff, and that might be what we find as well when we start analysing the video data. What's really exciting for us is that we've found that what you need is 2.5 seconds at a minimum, but in aggregate over a number of ads. And I think that's a new learning that really moves the debate on. It's consistent with some of the patterns that other researchers have found, but is a genuinely new learning that's never been discovered before.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, but just to finish off, I was going to ask what's next. You've already given us a flavour of that, potentially a collab with System 1, Brand Metrics and Lumen, which sounds very exciting. Is there anything else in terms of the next steps on your research path, as it were, that you can reveal today that you're going to be sort of focused on next?
Well, one of the principal questions we had was about the power of context, and does it make a difference which publications your ads appear in and which subjects they appear next to. And so the next stage for us is to work with Newsworks, the British newspaper news brand organisation. And so we're doing some really, really interesting work with them and with Peter Field of the long and the short of it fame.
Lord Peter Field.
Yeah, absolutely. Lumen, we've David Bassett, our head of analytics, trained under Les Binet. So we've been doing lots of work with Les in the past. It's nice to be working with Peter now to put those two things together. Yeah. Exactly. So I think the next stage of the research is going to be about the impact of context on that, specifically for news brands. And within that, I think we'll probably release all the video data as well. But again, that answering those questions will just beg some more. I mean, what are the questions that you're most excited about in answer?
No, but I think you're right. The richness of this data, and our data is rich, your data is rich, put together, it's 1 + 1 is 3. But it's really rich. So we can keep answering questions for a long time. I think we touched on another question just recently, and that's the messaging, right? How much attention time do you need? Is it half a second, summing up to 2.5, or is it 2.5 and more? Well, it depends on how information dense the communication is, of course. So that's another thing that we could spend a lot of time thinking about, and maybe the other way around. If you know that the attention time is short, you need to adjust the advertisement, and so it comes back to the messaging, and not just the creative, and not just the brand, also that.
The final thing that I'm particularly excited about is about understanding attention and intention over time. And I think that one of the things that we're really understanding, and again, thanks to the astonishing richness of the brand metrics dataset, is how long people how long the uplifts last for. So with the brand metrics data, not only do you know how many ads people were served, and then with our stuff, how many they looked at and how long they looked at it for, but then we also know when people answered the questionnaire afterwards, if it was 1 day after us being exposed to the ad, or 2 days, or 3 days, or a week. And this gives you a sort of decay rate of attention. Like people used to talk about ad stock for TV ads, but this could be at stock, attention stock there, to work out not just how many times people need to be exposed to and engage with an ad, but how closely bunched those things need to be.
The cadence is very interesting. Yeah.
And this is going to, I think, equally be tremendously important, not just for advertisers, but I think for a deep understanding about how the mind works at all. I like this business because it pays the rent, and advertising is it's a valuable part of the commercial world. But the data that we've got here also begs some more fundamental questions about human memory at all. And I think especially this idea of a decay rate and being able to measure exposure, attention, intention, memory, and add in the impact of time, that's going to be really, really fascinating. I'm looking forward to us releasing the data on that.
So media buyers have had two, well, obviously this is simplifying again, but there's two kind of ways to do things, right? Quite often, either they'll have a campaign that might last for a month and there'll be a big burst into that month, and then they'll go quiet again. And others will say, well, we're going to do slightly less than that, but always on. So it'll be really interesting if your data can help to help sort of inform how that should work in future. Should it be a short burst, lots of those 10 ads that you talked about over 10 days or over a month, or should it be maybe one a month or one every 3 weeks over a longer period? And how do those two things compare and contrast, and versus big brands versus small brands and all the rest of it?
Exactly. I think, well, to be honest, to finish the conversation, you just realise just how many more questions there are. Anders and I have both been working in media for 10 or 15 years. Yes, exactly. And I've built up a big battery of questions about, wouldn't it be interesting to know this and that and the other? But not a day goes by without another clever person saying, well, what about this or what about that? And so hence why we're so excited to go to ATS and why we're so excited to be here on the podcast, because I hope that some of the people who watch this or listen to this or hear us at ATS or whatever will come in and say, well, what have you thought about this? What about culture? What about age groups? Or what about this objective or that timescale? Or people will come in and think of the questions that we've never thought of before. I really hope that some of your listeners today get in touch and say, you idiots, you haven't thought about this. And you go, no, damn right we haven't thought about it. But thank you very much. We'll start thinking about that. Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Anders, any final thoughts from you other than you need to give Mike a job because he's done such a good job at selling your
he's going to keep doing that, so I don't have to pay him. That's the good thing.
Fair point.
No, I think this has been tremendously interesting. I agree. We have so many questions still to ask this data set, so that it's going to be great. The whole recognition of repetition and frequency, to me, I've been living in that for a long time, but I think this data shows that I think many consumption decisions, you choose this ketchup or that or these pair of shoes, it's the aggregate lifetime of ad exposure that makes you make that decision. Course, so this whole industry needs to stop obsessing about the individual ad impression and talk about a little bit about the repetition and the time people spend with the brand. So I think there's a lot around that.
Perfect. We'll wrap there because I've kept you longer than I promised that I would. So I could carry on talking for hours, though. It's really fascinating. Good luck at ATS. I hope it goes down a storm. Thank you both, Anders and Mike, for being on the 6 Sales podcast. And thank you to Lumen Research for sponsoring.
Thank you.